turned completely upside down, and your reality was totally shaken. When one day you found yourself in the right place, but at the wrong time. You would have experienced a glitch in time, what is commonly known as a time slip. The following stories will have you wondering whether or not we do indeed exist in a matrix, and occasionally that matrix has a temporary hiccup, and you might be caught right in the middle of it. The following are 3 mysterious time slip and time travel stories. Story number 3. On October the 20th, 1969, on Highway 167 north of Abbeville, Louisiana, a man known only as LC and his business associate Charlie were driving down Highway 167 at about 1:30 in the afternoon. It was a warm day, and then had their windows rolled down. After driving for a while, they noticed a very old turtleback car with the rounded back travelling in the next lane over. They pulled up alongside of it, matching its speed. They claimed the car was in brand new condition, with an orange license plate dated 1940. They thought perhaps it was off to a car show or belonged to a collector. What was truly strange was that its driver, a young woman, was dressed in 1940s attire, with a child in the passenger seat also dressed in 1940s clothing. Their confusion turned to urgency when they realised the young woman was in distress. As Elsie described, she appeared on the verge of tears. This prompted Elsie to ask the woman through a rolled-up car window if she needed help. She nodded yes, so he motioned her to pull over, and she nodded again. Elsie and Charlie then drove in front of her and pulled over to the side of the road. But when they turned to look back at the woman in her old car, expecting her to pull up behind them, she had seemingly vanished. There was absolutely nobody else around, just Elsie and Charlie looking at each other in disbelief. At that moment, another car pulled up behind them, where its driver jumped out, himself panicked, asking what had just happened to the car in front of him. From his description, it had simply blinked out of existence. They talked for a moment and then searched in a daze for an hour. The woman and her car were simply gone. Elsie and Charlie wanted to keep the event a secret, while the third man felt they should report the incident to the police. But what, after all, could be done? And what the hell would they tell the police? Story number 2. In 1993, Alf and Eileen Roberts were heading back to their hotel at Dunster, Somerset, UK, as they had been travelling around Devon. It was 7:30 p.m, and they found that they were lost and suddenly ended up in an unknown village. They stopped to check their map and looked across at a polished wooden sign that said Bampton, Best Kept Village, 1976. And everywhere were tubs of flowers, but the strange thing was, it was deadly silent, and there were no people to be seen. They eventually made it back to their hotel, and were so impressed with the beauty and colourful display of flowers in the village of Bampton, they decided to return and take photos. However, on their return, they found that all the tubs full of flowers had gone. The polished wooden sign had gone, and the whole village looked different, but it was Bampton. It was at this time they realised there were strange anomalies. Whilst previously in the village, he'd dropped a cigarette on the map, leaving a burn mark, but now there was no sign of the map being burned. And when they first entered the village, it was 7:30 p.m, and when they left, their watches were still showing 7:30 p.m. It was as if time had stood still. The strangest thing of all was that when they checked the records of Best Kept Village in the UK, the records showed it was Bampton, 1976, but remembering that when they originally passed through the village, it was 1993. Story number 1. In the summer of 1979, Cynthia and Len Gisby invited friends Pauline and Jeff Simpson to accompany them to Spain and were to drive through France on the way there. Neither had driven out of England before, so it was to be an adventure. But what happened to the two couples ended up being more than just an adventure. They were now in France and it was 8 p.m. when they decided to look for a place to stop for the night and found a rustic old stone building which looked like an ideal place to stay. They were politely greeted by the owner, and fortunately one of them could speak a little French. On entering, they found a small room with a few wooden tables with white tablecloths. They were then shown to their rooms where they found an old wooden bed with a fur-like covering. When they pulled back the blanket, they found a feather mattress and the sheets were made of harsh calico-type linen. By this stage, they were feeling rather cold and decided to close the window, but were then shocked to find there was no glass in the window, only shutters. That night, they were amazed at the exquisite old French cuisine, and the beer tasted like it was made locally. What shocked them the most was that the cutlery appeared very old. They all thought this was part of old rural France and thought nothing unusual about any of it. The next morning before breakfast, the couple was so impressed with their food and accommodation that they decided to take photographs of themselves in and around the old building. Whilst having breakfast, two gendarmes entered the building and proceeded to drink cognac and coffee that appeared to be a regular morning ritual. The strangest thing was their uniforms appeared to be very old style. Then a young woman walked in wearing a very long dress. Again, her apparel was very old-fashioned. As they were about to pay the bill, one of the men asked the policeman where the nearest motorway was, and he appeared to have no idea what he was talking about. Another shock was that the cost of both accommodation and food for all four of them had only come to 19 francs, which in 1979 would have been equivalent to about $5. After their holiday in Spain, they were so impressed with their accommodation in France that they decided to stay there again on the way back to England. Unfortunately, after much searching, they could not locate the building and returned home to England. The strangest thing was that after they had the photos developed, they found that none of the photos taken at the French hotel had come out, and that was using 2 cameras, yet all of the other photos of their holiday had come out. They decided to do some research on the uniforms and the young woman's dress and found that they were from the early 19th century and that the cost of accommodation and food from that time would have come to about 19 francs. A few years later, the two couples decided to go in search of the original building because they were so intrigued by their experience. They did eventually find the building, but it was in ruins, and next to the ruins, they also found the remains of what was once a police station. What confused both couples the most was if they had entered a time slip and found themselves in the early 19th century, why did the people not notice their car or question their modern clothes? And how were they able to pay their bill in modern money? This confused them even more,